live.
We are live. All right. You switch my camera. Very good. Now I'm dark, but that's all right. Good evening, everyone, to the Maritime Advisory Board monthly meeting of October 15th. As by usual, I'll go around my screen, introduce people. We have Alan Miller, a board member. We have Beth Bellis, a harbor master. We have graced with the presence of Alderman Ross Arnett. We have Debbie Goslin, a board member, Frida Wildley, a board member, Jake Iverson from Watermark, who is a regular attendee, Rick Nelson, board member, Andy Fagley, board member, Mike Tomasini, board member, Scott Allen, board member, Peter Trogdon, board member, Hope Stewart from the City of Annapolis, Duncan Hood from a board member. We have Madeline, our City of Annapolis TV coordinator, and Kim Consoli, our reporter. And I don't think we've had a meeting where we've had this many board members present at the same time.
I think we're hard up for entertainment.
Well, or tired of back-to-back boat shows. So anyway. All right, we will call the meeting to order. First order of business on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the, I said July, but it's actually the September meeting. We have are there any suggestions or corrections? If not, is there a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Mr. Tomasini has so moved. Is there a second? Mr. Hood has quickly seconded. And is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor? Raise your hands so Kimberly can see. Kimberly, that was unanimous. Any opposed? Yep, it's still unanimous. All right. Was there anything to report, Peter Trogdon, from the MIAB meeting? Or was there even one? For some reason, I don't think there was one. Your lips are moving, but nothing's coming over the airwaves. You're still on mute.
Mhm.
All right, there you go. Now, but you unmuted your screen, but we're still not getting any audio. The issue I had last time was I just put my computer on mute and dialed into one of the call-in numbers and just used my phone for the audio. So while you are doing that, we'll go on. I have the blessing of being the designee for the October meeting, although I don't believe there is a meeting. I thought the next meeting might be November, but I will follow up and check on that. And Peter, whenever you get signed in, you can just interrupt and we'll pick up where we left off. In the meantime, Hope, staff report.
Yeah, so I know that Mike Tomasini will give kind of an update on the Annapolis Small Maritime Business Work Group. We just had a meeting that ended half an hour ago. So yeah, he can give you all an update, but I think that discussion is going well so far. On the city end, we still have lots of events, even though boat show is over. So if y'all want to get out and support any local businesses and community groups, there's still the First Sunday Arts Festival going on in Inner West Street until November 3rd. We have Maryland Avenue's Fall Festival on October 20th, and October 26th is the Day of the Dead at Maryland Hall. And looking ahead to November, on November 21st, Anne Arundel Community College is hosting an event. It's a Chesapeake Regional Innovation Summit. And that is, November 21st at Anne Arundel Community College. And it would just be interesting because we do talk a lot about innovation in the maritime economy as well. So just wanted to let you all know about that.
what are the innovations that are discussed?
Well, it doesn't really say, but it says it features a panel of local CEOs and industry leaders, a hackathon, and a big idea awards ceremony. So it's kind of a resource fair as well for career and entrepreneurs. So, yeah.
Okay. And any questions for Hope on that report? So Hope is and I'll ask the rest of the members when we get to the topic, but while you're here, has there been any feedback or report from the two boat shows?
No, I've not heard anything. So, I mean, but it's been beautiful. I'm sure it was packed and busy. So, yeah, hopefully everything went well.
Certainly the weather cooperated.
Hmm.
Uh,
If well, I will say, as a vendor there, it was pretty good traffic. So good weather and a good turnout, certainly. Seemed busier than last year's. So Peter actually might know more about this than I, but
Can you hear me now?
we can hear you now.
Okay. Well, I just got this new laptop the other day, and this is the first time I've tried to do this. So I had to change all the settings, but I'm glad you can hear me. Um, as you know, the weather was perfect for both shows, so we didn't have any rain days or flooding. So attendance was really strong, and we had more exhibitors at the sailboat show than the powerboat show, but the sailboat show was totally sold out, and very nearly sold out was the powerboat show in terms of exhibitors, and then. Uh, attendance was at record levels all the time, for lots of reasons, but probably the weather was probably the biggest help. Um, the economy's been strong, and there's some new innovation in terms of some of these big catamarans and some other equipment. So everybody was pulling for a big show, and people were there for no reservations or say no holdback from people coming from overseas, from both Canada and Europe. We have a pretty strong attendance from there as well, and those people were there in big numbers. So it's really a home run, kind of a spectacular time for people to come and spend time in Annapolis. It's really showcased the city well, and the county and the state. So I all we heard was really good news from exhibitors about sales and orders.
So I was out on the water. Okay, Alan, go ahead.
Just to add on to Peter, we broke all our records this time. We sold more on Friday, the powerboat show, than we have on any powerboat show since we've been going to the show, and then the same thing on sailboat. So we were pretty happy with it.
Wow.
Great, Alan.
So the noticeable thing, I was out on the water on Saturday and actually with someone else, but we cruised down through the outer harbor and then through the inner harbor. The most noticeable thing that two things caught my eye. One is the number of visiting boats that were anchored even out as off the mouth of Spa Creek, on the downriver side of the shoal marker. It wasn't as crowded as a Blue Angels or a 4th of July, but it's the first time I've noticed that part of the public anchorage or free anchorage was actually occupied not on one of those major events. The other thing that was very noticeable is the number of catamarans that both seemed to be in the sailboat show and that were anchored in the outer harbor and on the moorings. And Beth, you may be able to elaborate a bit more on that. But it was noticeable that it may have been as much as 25 or 30% of the boats that were on the moorings or at anchor were multi-hulls.
Yeah, if I can throw something in there, Terry, I have a feeling that what we're seeing is a resurgence of the snowbirds coming back to town, plus these new catamarans coming. Back Creek was in freaking sane. I couldn't get out of my slip. So, I mean, and I think this is good news for us. We got people coming back on their trip north to south, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I could speak to that unless you want me to wait.
No, go ahead.
I would say the number of anchored boats were unprecedented. And there's been a growing concern about anchored boats for multiple reasons. One is they're not able, there are so many boats, it's not possible for them to actually be they're not able to be in compliance with Title 15. They can't be 75 feet or greater apart. And it's impossible for us to actually enforce it. So we can go out and say, hey, you're too close. And they'll say, well, I was here first. And then we can say, well, I'm sorry, but you need to move. And then an hour later, another boat comes and anchors in their place. And so we've had a number of constituents that are super frustrated about the anchored boats, to the extent that constituents seem to want to explore some legislative solutions. And so I've spoken by email with many of them as to what maybe those legislative
Solutions, man.
solutions might be, and I'm not sure what that would look like, but we might need to brainstorm about that. But definitely we did a lot of, like, our team doesn't like to do this corralling of boats at 30 knot winds that are careening into rocks or other people's property. So for sure, the number of anchor boats were unprecedented, and the problems were something that my team, we did our very best, but we couldn't really conquer it. So we would love to speak to this team or Alderman Arnett about what some solutions could be moving forward.
When you talk about 75 feet, you're talking about boats anchored up on Spa Creek or Back Creek off the shorelines. Am I correct?
So all vessels in city waters are supposed to be
I guess
75
between
feet
them, isn't it?
apart. Yeah, and they're also supposed to be 200 feet from a public mooring and 200 feet from a public landing and 300 feet from a bridge. So there isn't any way that more than 150 anchored boats could. Well, there's no real realistic way for us to enforce that.
I question how many of those snowbirds know that.
I think they all know it because they have to fill out the anchor registration. And when they do that, they have to read all the terms and they have to agree to them electronically.
What anchor registration? Now you mean any boat that anchors now has to register?
Yeah, so if you stay in city waters more than 3 days, which is most of our boat show folks, they have to register. And when they go through that registration, it's just like something you would do online, and they have to, like, say, I read and I understand this and I'm going to abide by this. And so most of those people actually do read that and they say they're going to abide by that. And then we do, so we patrol that. And so our team fills out anchor logs and they record the GPS coordinate, the name of the boat, the name of the driver or the operator. And then if you're not registered, they reach out to you and say, hey, Captain, you need to register. So we do a pretty rigorous attempt at making sure everyone abides by those rules.
But if they don't have to register, if they're only here for 2 days, they're not going to get the rules. Am I correct?
Well, correct, but that's not really a thing during boat show. No one stays for 2 days during boat show. Generally.
I suppose I could be optimistic, glass half full, and say the number of boats is a problem we should be lucky to have. The flip side is the management of an increasing number of boats I can see would be an issue. I'm always aware of going back with, I guess, Debbie and I probably are the longest serving, that back when this board was first started, one of the first things we undertook was trying to de-emphasize enforcement and regulation, because we had DNR, we had the Coast Guard, and we had the city, all three patrolling the city waters. And I can understand the need to get back to some enforcement, but I would hate to see the city get back to being a reputation of an unfriendly venue. So I think to the extent that Alderman Arnett and you, Beth, and this board and others can find a solution that is short of enforcement and more on education and compliance, is going to be a very, is the way we should be going, because I just remember
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely hear you, but I definitely think that there's been some folks that really think that we need to have a finite number of permits. So if Spot Creek can only hold 30 boats or 40 boats or 50 boats, they want us, we're speaking about having a finite number of permits that would cost some money, even if it's a minor amount of money, so that we can say, you know, for $10 a night or whatever, or X number of dollars per week, you have this permit and there's a finite number of them, so that because ultimately the big problem is that they drag anchor and they're striking other things.
Were there any incidents over these 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think Sunday there were more than 5 boats that were dragging anchor, and
With
you
the
know, our
sun
team,
afternoon.
yeah, it was blowing more than 30 knots, and it's every year.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we are seeing is that not only do we have a lot of boats, we have a lot of much bigger boats. And it's going to come down to some sort of decision. Maybe we can widen the creeks.
I
Um,
do.
Also, if I
I'd
might,
like-
oh, sorry, I
like
was just
this-
gonna add,
So let's back up a second. Let me ask Duncan one quick question, then we'll come back to Peter and Rick and Mike, all three. Duncan, one of the things, since you and probably Debbie are closest into the marina end of it, one of the things that has come up that I've heard discussion about, both from people passing through, who I know, as well as just looking at the not only the length of boats, but more importantly, the width of boats, is that you're going to have to be some rethinking about reconfiguration of marinas, number one, which means reducing the number of slips and widening them. But the other thing I've heard tales of, and that is charging according to both length and breadth,
Very interesting.
almost on a square footage basis as opposed to a linear footage basis.
I think that, from what my experience, that is pretty typical. Unless you've got a really huge marina with a lot of slips that are the same size. I know at Annapolis Landing, we charged almost a different price for every slip, just because of where it was in the marina, how wide it was, what the catwalk next to it was like, and you know what the market will bear. So,
Yeah.
but definitely the big ones for catamarans were more than, if it was a 50-foot catamaran slip, it would be more than a 50-foot monohull slip.
Certainly the same on my
Makes
end.
sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're just selling space. So
And we are absolutely maxed out at this point. That's good. But at the same time, you know, we're coping with these guys. They just jam up everything. They take a lot of space. So yeah.
yeah.
All right, Peter, I think you wanted to say something. I think Rick wanted to say something, and I think Ross wanted to say something. And Alan maybe. So we'll start with Peter.
Thanks. So many of you probably know this, but I'm not sure everybody knows this, but the boat show lease with the city states that 50% of the ticket sales go to the city. And if I believe that they go right to Harbor Master's budget. Is that right, Beth? That revenue?
I think it goes in the general fund.
Yeah, it goes to the general fund.
General fund. And does anybody know about how much that was last year?
465,000, something like that.
So yeah, just short of $500,000 during these last 2 weekends are going into the general fund. So those are the people that are anchoring out and visiting our city.
There you go, Peter.
Going to our restaurants.
Yep.
We don't get we get a piddling amount of sales tax revenue, so that doesn't.
Zero.
Okay, so that's another issue in that benefiting restaurants and retail does not benefit the city financially.
But it's good for the businesses, and that's a good
Well, it's
thing.
good, great for the businesses, certainly.
That helps
So-
an app.
Just in terms of, obviously, more boats means more dinghies, means more people needing a place to land. How have we seen any issues related to that? And is there some solution to kind of better transport people from the boats as they get further out into the mouth of the river?
Water taxi, water taxi, water taxi, water
I think
taxi.
yep.
That's the solution to the dinghy problem.
Right.
And I'm just curious, has it become more of a problem? I didn't hear
Yes.
anyone mention that. Yep.
Yeah, the Navy gets pretty upset at the academy, and then they contact the city and our team, and there is often a little drama about the big dinghy problem that piles up, and we really need to educate more and get them to just jump on the water taxi,
I can speak to that if you would like.
please.
So the dinghy problem, it's been growing for years, and we did bring this to boat shows with a lot of like photographic evidence to say like, hey, this is a big problem, we need to solve it. We offered some solutions, not entirely to the fault of boat shows, but between the city and boat shows, we didn't find a resolution in this past year. That wasn't great that happened. So this year it was worse than ever. People were really angry. The Navy was furious. People were tying to the Navy wall and climbing over onto Navy property, which in their mind was a Homeland Security issue. They were very angry. So what we did was we dedicated 2 employees on boats to man the dinghy dock. So they put as many boats as they could. You know, they had that first layer, and then they could have a second layer with like a longer painter line. And then fortunately, boat shows gave up a portion of St. Mary's, or maybe all of St. Mary's. So we were able to send them to St. Mary's and have them taxi in, just like Peter said, which was great. And we did keep tempers to a minimum, but moving forward, there needs to be a better solution. And to me, what that looks like is a floating dock. Either the entire side of the Bertus dock on the Navy side needs to be for dinghies, so it's a whole U shape. So it's the side of Bertus dock and the whole U shape over to the DNR dock is for dinghies. And we might still need a person to man that, because we don't want people climbing over other people's boats and getting angry. Or we could run a floating dock that runs along the Navy seawall, and it's sort of a walkway. So I tie my dinghy and I climb onto this floating dock, and then I walk around. But in no circumstance should one be climbing onto federal property to get to the boat show. But yeah, our team wasn't super excited to have to man that, but we did it, and it worked out fine.
So with respect to the DNR dock portion of I'll call it the Bertus Basin, did the DNR give up their space during the boat show to help accommodate dinghies?
They haven't had a boat there for more than a year.
I understand that, but they seem pretty protective about keeping ownership, I'll call it, of the space without keeping a boat there.
They're not. They've actually spoken about not coming back. They seem to be looking for alternate spot, and they don't have a boat there, and they never seem to want a boat there any longer.
how about taking, this is segueing to a different, slightly different topic. How about taking those 3 or 4 pilings out that are there for the Weidner when it acts as an icebreaker, which hasn't happened in the last memory.
Yeah,
Yeah, we certainly could consider doing that. There's nothing in the right of entry that requires us to keep those there. We do it out of being a good neighbor.
Well, they were
I mean-
very adamant at the meeting I sat in while we were discussing this, the Burtis dock in the mayor's conference room. They were extremely adamant that they were going to keep those pilings there, because I specifically raised that topic because it really is an impediment more than a help to anybody.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, Terry, but I haven't pushed that issue because honestly, the state of Maryland gifted the city a multi-million-dollar piece of waterfront property, so I didn't want to upset. And the icebreaker is an important function when we need it. So when we need it, they want that. Does it need to be there in my view? Absolutely not. But I have not pushed that issue because I just didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze.
We certainly, if it's frozen in, things are like the head of the face of the Susan Gamble Park is usually empty.
I mean, I agree. I don't think they need it, but I think they need it. So I've tried to be kind.
Okay. No, I just segued to that. So Scott.
2 questions regarding what Beth is saying. One, is there a way to promote the water taxi as a way to get ashore with, I don't know, websites or handouts or some kind of notification, especially for the anchored boats out there that aren't in the city itself necessarily? And if they could know more about the water taxi, try to keep the number of dinghies limited to a certain number in there. That's a question. And also, I've seen other harbors up in New England, for example, but having a floating dock out on a mooring that a bunch of dinghies can tie up to, and the water taxi just ferries back and forth from that floating dock, so people can come in their dinghies if they want. But I think we're using good dock space or whatever, especially during the boat show. That's maxing it out, and how to get around that without causing a bunch of problems and consternation for you and the staff, Beth, and the safety.
Yeah, I definitely think that all of your thoughts have merit. I'm not sure that the volume of boaters, I'm not sure that particular thought would solve everything given the volume.
Not everything,
so
but
we could certainly maybe curtail the problem, but given the number of anchored boaters and moored boaters, I still think that the number of folks that are going to dinghy in, even if most of them taxi in, we still need to figure out a problem for these dinghies, figure out a solution.
If we had other floating docks on a couple of moorings in the harbor, and then have a sign that on the dinghy dock that says full, like parking lot full when you go to.
Yeah, that's exactly what our team did on Saturday and Sunday. They said okay, we're full, and you can't more big, because the sign's not going to work. Because if I really want to go to the boat show, I'm going to be like, yeah, you're not really that full. I'm just going to go ahead and tie up. So you need a person to man it, or you need another solution. And I'm sure that Peter Alexander, who we love with boat shows, I'm sure we're going to connect with him and figure out some solutions moving forward.
And the other question, how far out, Beth, is the city's jurisdiction on the mooring area? Is it past Horn Point? How far out? Because I agree with what everybody's saying about the number of boats, and I saw the anchor pretty far past the shoal pole.
Yeah,
and
the number of boats at the mouth and extending beyond the mouth of Spot Creek, in my mind, was unprecedented. And despite my best effort at studying this, I cannot find, as far as I understand it, it's to the center of the Severn River, the main stem of the Severn River. But I can't find something in code that specifies that. And I've asked and I have searched. So as far as I know, it's to the center of the Severn River. And if
How
Mr.
far
Arnett knows
out?
something better, I'd love to know.
You know, because I think they were anchoring out past, almost past Back Creek.
Oh, they were. It was crazy.
Hey,
They were, that's where I saw them when I came out of Back Creek.
and I think there's maybe a, you know, safety issue there, making sure everybody's far enough apart from each other when it gets rough as it did for a day. And I'm not sure Beth should be the person that has to go out and police everything way out there. Where does the DNR help out, or whoever, Coast Guard or whoever, help police boats that are start hitting each other when it gets rough?
Yeah, unfortunately, we called and no one does help. And what we try to do is contact the owner, because we don't want to wrangle boats. It's a total safety issue for our team. And if we try to re-anchor a boat and something goes terribly wrong,
You shouldn't
then
have
we'll
to.
be held liable. So we haven't come up with a good solution. I mean, we do have some solutions. So one thing that we do is we go down, so we have all these anchored registrations. And then if we see a boat that's dragging anchor or someone calls in, we run down to somebody that's on a radio for the boat show. We say, hey, can you please reach out on your radio and say the boat called Second, have the owner respond and correct the problem. The problem is many of those are not boat show workers. And so we can't always reach that person, because maybe they just got there yesterday, maybe they didn't register. So we have a fair amount of success, but we do have some gaps where we need help.
Do you ever call Watermark or the water taxi captains? Because I know in the past, when there's been a boat dragging, that was the go-to, because usually they were the ones that brought the owners into town.
We haven't, but that's a great point, Debbie. We can certainly do that, and I hadn't thought of that.
One question that I had, is there been conversation about maintaining the channel into Annapolis? Because with that amount of boats, that main channel is just so clogged. It was nearly impossible for a larger vessel to get into or out of Annapolis.
I haven't had that complaint, but we certainly can work on that problem. But I have not had that specific complaint that I'm aware of.
I was thinking something like maybe not Blue Angels, but maybe using the buoys marking the channel to let everyone know that this is a channel.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. But honestly, Jake, that's the first time I mean, I did see it, but I wasn't on a boat. So I didn't see it the way that you and your captain saw it. So I'm glad to know that, and we will work on that.
We had Catherine come in Saturday and Sunday, one to the yacht club and the other to City Marine. And it was a challenge. I mean, it was workable, but it was a challenge.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah.
It's
Absolutely.
like having the boat show on the same weekend is good for a fall wedding.
Woo.
I was at Noxie's, went over to Noxie's for dinner on Saturday, and there were 3 weddings going on at the Chesapeake Bay Beach Club at the same time.
Good grief.
Big events. Ross, did you have a comment? I thought you had a comment on what Beth was reporting.
Who are you speaking to?
You.
Oh, yes, I do. First of all, maybe we could use the mayor's dinghy to chase down boats that are dragging anchors. Beth, I'd be more than happy to work with you on legislation. And I did hear a rumor that there was actual fights at the dinghy dock at one point because it was so crowded. But I guess we're victims of our own success, but I think this is only a reflection of how I think pressures are going to get worse. I notice houseboats are not on the agenda tonight, but I think we're going to feel more and more pressures as boats get larger and reduce the number of slips for any kind of vessel, whether it's a houseboat or recreational boater. And I think that's going to put pressure on the harbor lines, which in turn puts pressure on navigation. So I think it's more than time to to look at these issues. And maybe that's something that in part can be looked at when we get the task force for the houseboats going. But I think as boats get bigger and the number of slips declines, these pressures are only going to get worse. And as we have great boat shows, which hallelujah, we want great boat shows, but that means that there's going to be more people parking further out. I wonder on the boat show ticket, I wonder if there's a place to put a notification about the availability of the water taxi. So the people can just look at their tickets and see, hey, we can, instead of dinging in and trying to find a spot, maybe we can just call the water taxi and get into the show. Just a thought off the top of my head. But I think these are issues that are going to be growing. I agree with the sentiment of the advisory board that we don't want to be heavy-handed in enforcement, but I will say I think the city is at its worst in enforcing the existing rules, and part of that is in financing the number of staff that we need to do the enforcement. We're just very lacking on that, and I know that the constituents are very upset about that. I get more complaints about enforcements than murders by far, and almost as many as I get on parking. So I think we're going to have to really look forward, and the MAB, I think, will be a critical part of that to the extent we're affecting harbor lines. The port wardens are going to have to bone up and do some thinking about harbor lines. So a lot of pressures that are forming, all for good reasons. This is happy success, but it doesn't mean that it's not something we need to address.
Yeah.
We have
Just
perfect weather.
question.
We have perfect weather for several weeks. We still have great weather. It's the first time I can remember we ever had perfect weather for both shows in a row. So it may be a bit of a fluke, and I think we should just pay attention to it and keep an eye on it.
Just if I might ask, in terms of the water taxis, as I understand them, they pick up at set points. They don't pick up people at boats a la waterbound Uber. Is that correct?
Sure, we pick up at boats out in the mooring field or the anchorage.
Okay, excellent.
So to Debbie's point about the weather, we also, it's the first time in memory we did not have a home Navy football game on either weekend. So what normally would have affected vehicular traffic coming to Annapolis on a Navy weekend for the boat show, we didn't have that impediment either. Navy was off one weekend and they were out of town the other weekend. And I don't know if the being off that one weekend was by design after many years of always playing at home on one of those two weekends, but I can't help but think it certainly helped alleviate traffic, vehicular traffic, if nothing else. But I think the various ideas about how to get the word out, I hesitate to call it advertising, but to get the word out about water taxis, whether it's, periodic announcements over VHF, whether it's part of the registration packet that they're encouraged to use water taxis for the 3-day and longer stays, that is part of that registration process, whether it's on the back of the ticket sales, or on the website when the tickets are being sold, attention if you're arriving by boat type of thing. Probably a concerted effort by the boat shows, perhaps coordinating it, and in conjunction with Watermark would be might pay dividends in the future, because it certainly would be getting the word out and encouraging that use, and putting the warning in there that the number of dinghies permitted to dock will be limited after it reaches X point. So plan accordingly. A bit of a threat might work some wonders. Andy raised his hand before you did, Scott, so I'll go to Andy.
I'll be brief. or I'll try. Oh, the size of the dinghies increases with the size of the boat. When it's an 8-person boat, as all the larger catamarans are, they now have at least a 15-foot or 16-foot skiff clogging things up. It would make perfect logical sense because they balk at the price of putting 8 people onto a water taxi. Run everybody in with your skiff, run the skiff back out to the boat, take the water taxi in for one person. It's a logical way to operate, and people just need to start thinking outside the box.
Okay. Scott,
My question, a suggestion maybe, and it's not just a policing thing, but on the front end, on the PRs, it's a team effort between the boat show and the city and Beth and everybody. But I'm just thinking out loud, some kind of a handout, whether it's a card or a little brochure, a welcome to Annapolis, and somebody, you could have high school kids out there in a dinghy. All the boats that are coming past the shoal pole get handed one of these cards, and Terry would have all that information on it. You might have it on websites as well, but all the boats coming in, just hand them a card that kind of here's the guidelines, and it might decrease the policing activity and the dinghy activity. And you say there's a limit here and a limit there, and they have, little where they are, and here are the options, and whether they're water taxis or other dinghy floats anchored out or wherever. But when people come past the shoal pole, let's say is the point, they get handed out something if possible, and that might help alleviate it. But it would take a team effort to do it. And the boat show might be the sponsor of the dinghy that's handing all these things out. But I think it would help everybody, boat show city, et cetera, to have guidelines, because people come into town and you don't know the rules, and you're kind of just exploring your way around, bouncing off docks and hopefully not bouncing off other boats. But the water taxi idea is good.
So just next year with City Dock construction, are the boat shows going to occur as normally scheduled?
I don't think we know that answer.
is that a rhetorical question?
Well,
Yeah, I really don't think we know that answer.
Okay, the reason I asked, I mean, on the boat show website, it has the April, show as well as the October sailboat show, and so I was just curious if it's on the website, but I don't know if as you say, if it's going to occur. So do we know when that might be known? Because maybe we won't have the mooring ball problem then.
I think until or unless the city realizes their $33 million FEMA grant, they are not able to move forward. But that's all I know, and I don't think we know when we will know that.
Or maybe Ross, do you know anything?
Correct. Beth, you're correct. And I just had a conversation with the city manager Monday noon, and we really don't know. My bet is we'll be having a boat show next year, because I don't think we're going to be breaking ground.
I agree.
Yeah. So that's good news for having boat shows, not necessarily good news for the resiliency, but the FEMA grant is the linchpin. And I think it would be foolish to be breaking any ground, messing around with the electrical boxes and those sorts of things until we know we can really go. And I know it's causing Gavin great angst, because he really does want to get this started on his tenure, which ends November next. So, but we really don't know at this point.
Yeah, and obviously it'll be helpful just to plan and not find out a couple months before the show that it's not going to occur. So,
well, I would think the boat show people would like to know as soon as possible too.
yes, I would bet.
There are a lot of people that would like to know.
Right.
All right. Just moving on.
Sorry, Terry.
Sorry, Terry. I hate to
oh, no.
drag this discussion on any further. I had just a question for Peter, and then a question for Beth. I guess I'll do Beth first. Were city moorings completely sold out for the duration of Sailboat Show?
Yes. before, during, and after.
After.
Full,
Yep,
full,
yeah.
full.
Got it. And then Peter, between you and Beth and these experiences, do you have an idea of how many of the dinghies that were tying in at street ends were vendors or visitors? Because it seems like if they're in town for a longer period of time, maybe they're here not just for one day of the show. Maybe they're here as vendors.
Yeah, it's a great point, Mike. We don't even know if those people were going to the show.
Right.
They're just snowbirds headed south. They could be working at the show. They could be working for the show. They could be boaters going to the show or boaters headed into town for lunch, breakfast, maybe to enjoy a ride on the pirate boat.
Yeah, maybe.
So
No, you don't. Right. So you don't know. So
I mean, I would say based on my conversations with the folks on those dinghies, which I've had many, 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 I would say a third of them, maybe a third of them were boat show workers, and close to 2/3 of them were folks visiting the show. Very few were not one or the other from
Got it.
what I'm experiencing speaking with them.
Got it. So, I mean, I was just thinking long term, a potential solution is to provide a dinghy dock access for vendors who could have access through a gate that's guarded by the boat shows, so you don't get boat show attendees coming through that gate. But if you have people who are regularly coming and going to their boats that are anchored out in the thing, that they could come and tie up their dinghies there. So boat show vendors only, and then at least we remove that volume from the city street end parks. And then my other question, and this is a much longer term conversation, is probably for these types of events with the money that the boat show provides to the general fund, could we expand the mooring field in Spa Creek into the anchorage, thus making the mooring field bigger and pushing the anchored boats further out, and one, collecting money for those moorings. Is there a way to temporarily do that for big events like boat shows, 4th of July, and the Blue Angels that we could explore?
It's long been my team's goal to expand the number of moorings both in Spa Creek and at the mouth. We haven't. So when we've tried to push that forward, we have gotten a lot of pushback from constituents, particularly in Upper Spa Creek. But we believe that more moorings will mean less violations, and less concerned and less boats dragging anchor and more responsible boaters. But I'm not sure the residents agree with that. So we'll continue to push that, but I don't know that anyone will agree with us.
But no pushback from the Navy on that, because the border to that anchorage is basically all Naval Academy property.
No, we usually don't have any trouble getting collaboration with Navy on that.
Because they could be much more widely spaced than they are inside of the 1SC, and then you could manage it that way.
No, I agree.
Andy?
When you're talking
Just
constituents,
a point is that nobody can get insurance to go below Norfolk until November 1. So all the boats that are coming from the north are stacking up somewhere, whether it be here, whether it be further south to Norfolk. But the wave of boats peaks at boat show here. It's not going to diminish rapidly because nobody can go beyond Norfolk, and nobody really wants to hang out in Norfolk for 2 or more weeks.
excellent point.
Well, really good point.
Beth, if there's constituent pushback, they're likely to be Ross's constituents, and maybe Ross can.
No, I think they're actually Ward 1.
Ward 1?
I think they're Ward 1 pushbacks.
Yeah, it's the Annapolis side, it's the downtown side of Spa Creek that are usually the most vocal.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if the mooring field can go farther out into the front of the academy in that area, there should be constituent complaints about that, hopefully.
I mean, we really, That isn't something that we pushed out to have constituent feedback. The thing that we've talked about is an upper spa. So if we did do that, I'm not sure what the feedback would be.
But also putting in moorings, I'll call it the outer harbor, could help alleviate the problems that Alan mentioned with navigation of larger vessels, because now you're controlling where they're anchored, and you've got you keep, just like in the inner harbor, you're keeping the channel relatively clear. Obviously, when you extend the city dock for the boat show, that takes up a big bit of the channel, but certainly otherwise those mooring fields would help control the congestion at the mouth. All right. I look forward to having more discussions on the topic specifically, particularly about the dinghy docks and about how we can get the word out to people coming by dinghy. I do agree with the comment that this is a little bit of a seasonal, and I kind of equate it a little bit to parking congestion on land during boat shows, with neighbors, local residents complaining about the lack of parking and all the traffic and everything, and then 2 weeks later it's all gone, and now the complaint becomes something else. But we do have it is somewhat cyclical, that if you just wait long enough, it's going to go away. All right, everybody had a copy of Beth's report. The main takeaway that I came away with from a sort of a big overview is that there seems to be a fair amount of activity on various street ends that seems to be progressing, which is a good thing, because it's upgrading street ends dockage that we've been talking about, including 6th Street. I see Tucker Street, I think, was reapproved or was approved, 6th Street, and others. So Beth, maybe you can give us a quick overview, particularly on the street end that has been an ongoing project.
Sure, I would agree. Terry, Tucker Street is moving forward. Finally, 6th Street, the project will be presented in October.
It's on their agenda. It's on the Port Warden's agenda.
Yeah, Hopkins Cove is moving forward. The DNR provided concurrence of the proposal and the design. So that's all good. Shipwright, looks like we got another 250,000 for continued work at this location. To this point, we've only done like design stuff. 4th Street, if you've been there, is in terrible shape, and so we're excited to announce that there's grant money there to get that fixed and improved.
Is that 4th Street on Spa Creek?
Davis is pub.
The Davises, okay.
And so those are the headlines.
So to Ross, to your question about house barges not being on the agenda, Beth gives an update on that, and so I've not taken it as a specific topic. It's part of her report, but once the task force gets back up, we'll be more directly on the agenda. But Beth has an update in her report each month.
And I would tell you that Jackie Gild has her finger on that pulse much more than I do, and so I know that she reviewed that. I think that she has news, but I'm not sure if she actually put any comments in there.
So Jackie is working on a rewrite of an early draft that the mayor had, and providing the council members with a lot of good background information. We pulled the task force legislation to make some refinements. Several organizations asked for some overarching questions like, what is the benefit plus pro or con to the maritime industry? What's the benefit to the community? What's the benefit to the city? because these are going to come with very huge administrative burdens, just pump out alone, but also inspections and a number of other things. So those, we're going to draft those overarching things and then get into some drill down specific bits of information we need. Last night we had at the city council meeting, we had a number of liveaboards who came out to speak. They're quite concerned. I think they misconstrued the intent of the task force, but surprisingly enough, unlike the city, they had data. They told us there are 49 liveaboards. I'm not sure how they got it, and they had a different number of total slips than that that was developed by Sean Wampler. So, I mean, we're suffering just from a lack of information, and I think that's something we're going to have to get from the planning staff and maybe even some contract analysis. But the task force resolution will be introduced on the 28th, the meeting of October 28th. I'm not sure when the revised Maryland mayor's legislation will make it out, but you're right, Beth. Jackie Giles is shepherding that, and I think doing a good job of coming up with all the different things that we need to consider. This is a very complex issue. It's once again a Rubik's cube, and you can't focus on one square on one side of the cube. You have to look at all of the impacts all the way around, including.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I mean, I would say I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to Alderman Arnett for forming this this group to study this. And I would say my team's overall, if we only had one, if we could only say one sentence about houseboats, we would say how many resources are we giving to benefit how many people? Like that's a good question. That's our question.
I totally concur.
Right.
I get that. I get that.
Has the task force has not been appointed yet? Is that correct?
No, we have to do the legislation. I want to expand the size and the composition of the task force. And right now it's written that the mayor selects and the council approves. I'm not sure, but what we wouldn't be better off having the task force managed by planning and zoning and the harbor master, because Beth, you need more work. So
I do.
But I think
this time of year I'm up for it though.
Getting it down to a more feet on the ground level, I think is going to produce better results, but we're still working on that.
It would seem to me that the key to this task force, like back when we did 025, back when we did the original city dock plan, is who is going to be the herder of the cats. If you don't have a strong person to manage that task force, it's going to go in Rubik's Cube is going to look like a simple solution.
You're right.
I'd love to know when that task force is being put together and submit myself to be on it.
I think you would be a very good candidate.
Yes.
So I'd be happy with that.
A liveaboard, an experienced liveaboard.
There you go.
All right. The last item, since we had already talked about the boat shows to some extent, to a great extent, is the Alan and Scott. Is there any more activity on our local maritime recognition program?
Not much from my perspective. I don't know about Alan. I think it'll be more of a winter project.
I wouldn't expect a whole lot of effort during the boat shows.
So.
Last but not least is the status of the small business work group. We alluded to it earlier. Who can fill us in on that? Mike, you were at the meeting.
I was at both meetings. Now there have been two. It's a good group of people. The first meeting focused primarily on both Stephen and Hope, Chris Jakubiak and Eric Lashinsky, given basically a background to the people who were on the task force of the original maritime zoning and its intent, and the changes that were made and their intent. And the second meeting, which we had literally an hour before this meeting, was more focused on just a general summary from what are the ones who feel that they were largely left out of the flexibilities offered to others during the task force, and that's mostly WME, mostly smaller properties in WME and non-waterfront properties in WME, about what ways the ordinance could be tweaked or the legislation could be tweaked to potentially offer flexibility to those properties, either now or in the future. And Seth from Horn Point Harbor gave a pretty good and thorough summary from his perspective of, what kinds of things it would take to have it make sense for them to participate in either some kind of trigger or some kind of incentive to get a little bit more non-maritime flexibility. There was a pretty good discussion tonight. We have at least one more meeting. It's scheduled for the week leading up to Halloween. But yeah, most people have been participating, and I feel like, it's not stuff that we necessarily missed. We definitely talked about it when we were doing the original task force back in 2020 into 2021. It's just it's some of the finer details that we weren't able to quite put a hammer on how we should include those properties or what kinds of things they could offer to the industry that would have it make sense. So that's my perspective anyway. Questions?
So in that same regard, I mentioned at the last meeting that the property at the corner of Severn and Second, what I refer to as the Dome Chartering building, the new building on that corner that sits over on top of the Raven Studio, that the building was for sale because the business there, which was Dome Chartering / Global Oceans, et cetera, a shipping company, had been sold. I understood from a conversation with someone over the weekend that actually that business, which has about 20 employees, 100% maritime for sure, would like to stay in Annapolis. So I put that out to everyone to think about, and they would like to be in a maritime zone on the water. And so I put that out there for those of you that have either a direct interest or somebody who might have an interest in reaching out to whoever the real estate agent is with them. I don't know who that is, but it would be a shame to let such a large maritime presence get out of town when we're trying to fill maritime space.
No, and a really unique one too.
And a unique one. So,
Terry, what is their name, their actual name?
Good question.
Thank you.
They have various hats.
I'll text you, Duncan. I'll text you.
That'd be great, Mike. Thank you.
If you Google Global Ocean,
yeah,
you'll see that that's sort of the arching. But they've got a crewing company. They've got, they own ships. It's a sort of a multi-level group, but it's Global Ocean is I think the big name. Unless Mike, you've got a different name, but I think Global Ocean. They used to go by Dome Chartering, but I think that's it. The quote parent, it's not really a parent, I don't think, but is Global Ocean.
Yep. I just got a couple of direct contacts by proximity with their location,
sure.
for the principals anyway.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Mike.
I think the principal, the one who's running it now, would like to stay.
Yep.
All right. That concludes the agenda. Is there any new business that anybody wants to bring up? hearing,
Oh.
Rick unmuted his microphone, so he has something to
Just
say.
under the wire. I just wondering when the discussion on kind of electric ferries might come up to the advisory board. I know that the group just came back from Sweden, but if maybe Ross has some insight on that, but I think it's a pretty interesting topic.
Yeah, there are bids out to solicit makers for electric ferries. And of course, this has now grown to the county level. The county got a $3.9 million grant, and they're looking at bigger ferries. We're still waiting to see whether Wendy O'Sullivan is going to start developing tours of the Chesapeake Bay as forget what the national park or national something. I don't know where that legislation is in Congress. Chris Van Hollen and Ben Cardin have been pushing it, but I think with all the other fracases going on in Congress, it hasn't really raised to the top. But I think ferries are something that and electric ferries in addition, and the ferries that are up on what do we call it? What are the so-called America's Cup boats that are not monohulls any longer?
Boiling boats, yeah.
Foiling, yeah. The ferries on foiling can go very fast and create very little wake. So they're really looking at all of that. And I think there's interest up and down all of the state governmental jurisdictions. So it's something that is being looked at quite seriously, but no triggers have been pulled.
Andy, as I understand it, and I'm asking you this question because it's an electrical component to it, is that there's, and Ross, correct me, I think our request for proposals is in the process of going out. And I guess it's going out through the procurement office in the city. But I understand that the specs are for an aluminum hull boat, battery operated. Now that just in salt water, that just to me sounds not very bright.
Oh, it's easy enough to isolate the batteries, the electrics from the aluminum. And it's also easy enough to monitor the issues between the two. All of the bigger Harbor Master boats are aluminum, and they had electrical components to them. They didn't suffer from any stray current issues. It's all about a simple, dependable design. What I was going to say is, if they're bringing in a whole bunch of electric boats, I'd like the service contract for them because it's all about simplicity. If they make something where a committee designs it and it's going to be a disaster, I've seen it happen over and over again. A foiling fully electric ferry, to my mind, is got a very short range. All these things are going to have a generator supporting the electric end of it. They have to. There's if you're trying to operate continuously, there's no way you're not going to have some diesel support involved.
Hey, Terry.
Well, I see the city as the enabler here. I can't imagine that we're not going to turn this over to the private sector to manage and operate and maintain. But we'll see. We'll have a new mayor in about a year from now, and there may be a whole new philosophy on these things. Who knows?
Great. I'd like the service contract for the fountain downtown also.
Not sure there will be a fountain, but then that again will fall under the purview of the new mayor.
And I'd like to know which taxpayers are going to be paying for the passengers to ride those electric hydrofoil boats, because nobody's going to pay the ticket price for them.
Well, let me also throw out there, Ross, has any type of analysis been done on who would actually ride this on a dependable basis? I can't imagine that I would choose to take my car across the bay when I could drive across on the bridge, even if I get stuck in traffic.
Yeah, we're doing a beta test by putting foils on the mayor's dinghy.
And then you
I would say in New York City, where they came out with an extensive ferry system, not electric. But I believe that, almost half the people using it are tourists, even though it was, sold as a way the commuter. And I think that the subsidy, it may be upwards to $10 passenger. I mean, so it's quite expensive to do it.
Yeah.
It's like all transit systems, they're not self-supporting.
Yep.
So there will always be some kind of a subsidy from one level of the government at all. But it's not clear that I mean, in a direct answer to your question, Duncan, I don't know the specifics. I know that the county has thrown their weight in DNR and transportation at the state level. But my sense from the outside is it's kind of try it, you'll like it, kind
Yeah,
of
but
a
at
thing.
what cost? And in the meantime, the taxpayers are paying for that. Try it. And
Well,
since somebody else brought it up, I have to say, we have a private company that pays the city to provide water taxi service. Why would the city go into competition with its own tenant? And when that tenant has offered to produce hybrid vessels for the taxis, and the city's only going to operate it on the weekends, where the water
Cities,
taxi service loses
I
money
don't
all
think the
week
city
and
is
may
going to
make
be,
up for it on the weekends.
I don't think the city is going to be the operator. The city is doing the groundwork, the enabling, the investment in testing and so forth. But I know of no one in the city, certainly not in the transportation department, that sees themselves as an operator of the system. And in fact, that's why I brought up Wendy O'Sullivan and national parks. To the extent this becomes something that is pervasive around the Bay, they also will probably be the enabler, but will contract. We'll give Andy all of the electrical work, and we'll give Mike all of the wrapping and plastics over the winter time. But this is not a new idea. Craig Purcell and Chuck Weichel were talking about this under Moyer's administration.
I remember that. Yeah.
I think this is a notion that is being financed. We did get the big federal grant. It is not something the city can afford out of its own coffers. And I think you're right. It's not something that is going to bear any kind of significant fare. So we're in the testing phase, the enabling phase, and we'll see where it goes. And as I said, different ideas come in with newer administrations.
And I would assume that the city is not interested in, for the city's use, a foiling 30 passenger boat to go from City Dock to Back Creek.
What?
They're not going to Back Creek. They're just going to Fifth Street, the
Well, the
Spot
Fifth
Creek
Street.
side of Fifth Street.
So, I mean,
Turn out to City Dock.
that if you're gonna get a foiling 30 passenger vessel, I hope the intent is to not use it in the city waters, because I can't go more than 6 knots. So why should they?
Yeah,
Because they don't create a
it's
wave.
it's two proposals. One is the city's Fifth Street to City Dock electric ferry to carry passengers with bikes across the creek. The other proposal is a larger one, including Visit Annapolis and Anne Arundel County and other tourism agencies on the Eastern Shore to do a Annapolis to Rock Hall, or a Baltimore to Rock Hall, or a Annapolis to St. Michael's ferry. Those are the foiling ones. But
Right.
yeah,
That's correct, Mike. I think the Fifth Street to City Dock, that ferry, they just increased the speed to, I think, 20 knots for the RFP. They want that boat also to do 20 knots.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot of expensive thinking going on in that city.
In the equitable public water access, they identified 60 water access points. And so there's a notion that the service may be expanded to many of those water access points. You'll be able to walk with your bicycle out of your backyard. hop on a ferry, go over and eat at Chop Tank, hop on a ferry, and go around to Weems Creek. Or, I mean, look, this is an idea. It caught some money at the federal level. We'll see where it goes. I
Yeah.
have frequent meetings with one of the potential new mayors, and I think you'll see some refinements in the thinking depending upon the elections.
Well,
November.
I do have a question. I do have a question for you, Ross. When I don't know if it was your latest meeting at the Eastport Fire Department, but I think Rob Savage was there with you also. A couple of times, I believe he mentioned this is just primarily a one-way service over and back. Is that still a talking point, or has that changed in the last month?
It is still the talking point coming from the administration, but I don't think anybody can possibly think that's going to be a viable route by itself. And that's why I brought up.
He mentioned it a couple of times. That's why I was surprised.
Yeah, no, well, see, Rob is an advocate. He's come back from the trip to Netherlands and the trip to Sweden just now. And they're excited about what they're seeing in Europe. And of course, sailing in the Mediterranean, I thought the sole purpose of the big ferries was to mow down sailboats. But this is very formative. And just like the things that actually happen on top of City Dock, they'll change with administration. So I wouldn't get overly exercised at this point. I think it's something that will find its way, and it may find its way out the door. But I do know, Jake, in particular, that we've actually had specific things that we do not want to run a parallel system. And I think that we could be the investor and the enabler, but then we would turn it over to private operations. I don't think government should ever be directly, my personal philosophy, competing with the private sector. And so if we ever get these things and we really get worked out what the routes are, I don't think there's any way the city will be the operator.
But Ross, if the and I've heard that the idea is to move a bicycle from City Dock to Back Creek. Why can't the current operators simply provide a vessel or run that vessel along who are experienced operators in city waters at all of the access points, than to get somebody going to run a non-profitable adventure to take bicycles across the creek, when people will, with a bicycle, half of them will say, well, why don't I just ride across the bridge instead of paying $5 or $3 or whatever it is to ride one way?
There's all of those bridge openings that restrict bicycle across the bridge. Look, I'm going to tell you that I'm supporting this as a government financed exploration, and it is entirely likely that the exploration will come up with a dry hole. And I do think there will be a different emphasis with a new administration. But right now, the dollars are there. There's, as Mike says, there's interest at the county level, and there's interest at the state level, and there's interest at the federal level. And I do also agree, I tend to ride ferries as an entertainment form rather than a transportation form, except going across at Martha's Vineyard to Chappaquiddick from Edgartown, where you have to use the ferry. So, we'll let this work along and see where it ends up.
All right. Anybody else?
I think, Ross, you ought to put money in there for electric pirate ships too.
Yeah, and that's right. And we're going to have the alderman running it, and we're going to be squirting water on the other pirate ship and throwing vegetables.
Taunting.
Yeah, and taunting.
If you remember funnelators, they work really good with heads of lettuce.
Oh, man.
Yeah, maybe we'll get Gallagher to come back and smash watermelons too.
All right, anything else? Or do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Just real quickly, because we talked about it in the very early part of the meeting, Terry, the next Maritime Industry Advisory Board is November 19th. I'm not sure who's on the schedule for that, but
I will put it out with the next minutes. It is,
And
right, it's
I'm
early
sure
because, it's early because of Thanksgiving. I forgot I did notice that.
And
All
because I haven't seen Peter since August, congratulations, Peter, on the sale of your building.
Thank you, Mike.
That's a big
Wow.
deal.
That congratulations from all of us.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
And to a 100% maritime entity. Well done.
And so does that mean it's a bigger boat to go cruising on?
No.
Oh,
It's a 1031 exchange, right?
yeah, there you go.
All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
You got it.
Ms. Goslin, in a second, Andy, all in favor?